So the medical model is basically says a person is disabled because of their illness, impairment, or medical condition. It's their illness, impairment, or medical condition that is the barrier to equal access. And it places a responsibility on the individual to change to fit into society. So an example would be for me, myself in a wheelchair. If I was sat outside a building that had steps, the medical model says the reason I can't get into that building is because I'm in a wheelchair. And so it places the responsibility on me to try to normalize or cure in order to have equal access. There's now a different way of thinking of that is the social model of disability. And that says a person is disabled because of the way society is arranged. It is society's attitudes and infrastructure that create the barriers to equal access. And it places the responsibility on society to change to allow all to have equal access. So I find it's a useful thing to kind of always bear that in mind, that actually when we're thinking about making our work accessible, it is all of our responsibilities to do what we can to make adaptations and things for to allow everyone to have access, rather than placing those that responsibility on the individual. Then I've also got a couple of pictures that I wanted to share. They may be, again, familiar to you, but I think they're also useful for context. So this first one, it's a kind of a similar theme on one that you may have seen. It's the three people watching or trying to watch a sports game, and they're behind a fence, and everyone is on, well, there are three boxes. A tall person stood on a box who can see the game clearly, a short person on a box who can just about see the game. And in this version, there is a third box with someone in a wheelchair sat by it. They can't see the game. It's obscured by the fence and they can't use the box to get on it. The second side, we have it rearranged. So there is the taller person stood on the floor. They can still see the game. The slightly shorter person is now stood on two boxes. They have a better view, and we've actually replaced the box with a ramp, and the person in the wheelchair can now also see the game. So then that is basically, again, an example of this, the social model, and that it is putting in the right things to enable everyone to have access. There's one more variation of this that I find also quite useful. And this is, I'll describe it again. So this is maybe the one that you might be more familiar with. There's, again, the three people and three boxes, taller person, middle-sized person, short person, and with everyone on one box. The shorter person can't see. And this is, says underneath, in this first image, it is assumed that everyone will benefit from the same supports. They're being treated equally. However, even though they're being treated equally, they don't all have the same outcome. So then, and this is often, you might find that now people, rather than talking about disability equality, talking about disability equity. And this is the second image, where we have the boxes rearranged so everyone can see, taller person on the ground, middle person on one box, shortest person on two boxes. They can all see the game equally. In this second image, individuals are given different supports to make it possible for them to have equal access to the game. They're being treated equitably. So that's one of the things that we want to be trying to do, is making sure that we adjust the support that we give to make sure everyone is treated equitably. But on the third final image, the solid fence is removed, so no one needs those supports, and the barrier that was causing the access issue has been removed. And in this third image, all three can see the game without any supports or accommodations, because the cause of the inequality was addressed. The systemic barrier has been removed. So I get that's something that is really important to be thinking about when you're, whatever it is that you're doing. Are there any systemic barriers to access, and can you remove them? What can you do to remove them? And this kind of reminds me, these two things remind me of one of the first bits of advice that I got given when I first joined Stopgap, like 20 years ago. And that was from Vicky Balaam, who was the artistic director at the time. And she said when she first did a dance workshop and was leading a workshop with people with mixed abilities, she thought she was going to be really progressive and treat everyone the same, and realized that that didn't work because everyone is different, and actually everyone needed different support and different input. So the key is to treat everyone as individuals and to look for equity or work towards equity rather than equality. Just to kind of clarify that although both promote fairness, equality achieves this through treating everyone the same, regardless of the need, while equity achieves this through treating people differently, depending on need, to create a fairer outcome, which is obviously what we all want. But also it's a worth note to remember that not all access adjustments work for everyone, and that sometimes something that you might put in a session for accessibility for one person may then exclude someone else. So obvious example is maybe if you have someone who works very visually, you might want to have lots of visual aids and visual stimuli in your work, but then that may exclude someone who has a visual impairment. So you would then need to consider then audio describing what you have, the visual aids. So thinking about, can you use multiple tools to help create equality in access? So I'm going to then talk about two different access tools that we use all the time in Stopgap, and they are, I find them really useful to work with creating equity in movement. So the first one is movement translation, and the second one is open language. We use them from our community practice all the way through to our professional practice, and just kind of adjust and tweak them for whoever we're working with. So I'm going to do a little bit of a short thing on the movement translation. I could talk about it for like 2 hours, but I'll do a short introduction for you. So we have, how I like to think about movement translation is splitting it up into 4 different areas to kind of think about the movement, to focus on the movement, and to think about the areas that you're going to translate onto a different body or a different way of moving. The first one is thinking about here the intention and energy. The second area I think about is spine and direction. The third one is quality and rhythm. And the fourth one is detail and focus. Don't always think about all of them all the time, because that's like a heck of a lot to keep in your brain. Particularly if you're working in like a technique class, there just isn't the time to think about all of those all the time. So you might just pick a few. But the most important one, the one that I'm going to do a little bit of a demonstration about, is the intention. Like, if nothing else, then share your intention when if you're teaching movement, if you're creating movement, the intention is like super helpful. So I'm going to do a little demonstration. If we take a movement example of me pushing up on my wheels, there's lots of potential go back. There's lots of potential different kinds of intention that might be. I'll kind of go through. So it could be, you can kind of see it, I'm pushing up on my wheels. The kind of, if we look at it at face value, one of the things is that I change height. So it could be the intention is about changing height. And if you're thinking about that on different bodies, maybe for a standing dancer, it's about going into a rise, or it could be if someone doesn't have the ability to push up, it might be about finding a lift in the chest and kind of showing that intention and energy of rising. It could, however, when I push up, it actually allows my spine to lengthen. So sometimes I do that to stretch my spine. Therefore, a translation for another dancer may be, for example, like a downward dog in yoga or some kind of spine stretch, there's a two-way stretch. I'm pushing down to come up. So with that, it could be a completely different shape movement, but the intention is the same. Another option that I might do a push-up for, pressing up on my wheels, is if I was to do lots repeatedly, which I won't do right now because I'll get out of breath, but that would be a kind of strengthening and kind of more of a fitness thing. So then again, the intention is different. It's fitness, it's strengthening. And so the movement, a translated movement, could be completely different. That might be for a standing dancer, they might go down into press up and do press ups on the floor. They might do squats, various different options. So from one very simple move, just pressing up on my wheels, you've got at least 3 different options of intention, 3 different ways that it might translate. So when you're, whatever circumstances you're in, if you're teaching movement, to share that intention, if you've got people who, well, particularly if you have people who have a different physicality and they're having to make choices over their options of movement, if you share the intention, then it will help inform their choice. Also, even if everyone that you're teaching has the same physicality, it helps to actually know, rather than just mimicking the teacher or trying to copy and recreate the same shapes, if you actually know why you're doing it, you have a deeper understanding of the movement. So this is an example of how sometimes when we put things in place for access purposes, it actually can benefit everyone who's in the space. I shan't go into all the rest of the different areas of translation, but if you are interested in finding about more, little plug for Stopgap's home practice. So we have online free dance classes, a series of free dance classes, and also groundwork and seed sessions that look at the kind of some fundamentals of contemporary dance and inclusive dance. So if you head over there then and look for there's these translation shorts and there's a longer video on translation, and that will kind of look more into the different areas, and you can get a bit more of an idea of how we work in Stopgap to blend movement and to find cohesive movement through different bodies. That is movement translation in a very quick nutshell. Then the other one that I spoke about was open language. So this is a little chance for you to not listen to my voice the whole time. And if you have space, if you're able to, you can have a little move around. I'm going to give some instructions. You don't have to. If you just want to be still and think about the instructions, that is also fine. But sometimes it's nice to stop staring at the screen. And so if you have a little bit of space, feel free to kind of create a bit of space and be ready to move. So the first instruction, if you want, is, if you can, if you're able, to have a walk around your room. I think I can see some people going for it. Yes, thank you. Have a little walk around your room and just notice, what does it feel like? If you're thinking about it, what does it make you think? What sort of movement is it? What kind of style? How does that feel to you? What do you notice? You can come back to the screen if you want, or just have a moment to think. Generally, when we say something like walk around the space, most of you will have been thinking doing one able foot in front of another. That's kind of like, that's what we tend to think. And there's not a lot more information than that, other than it's at a steady pace. So I've got some different words for you to try. Instead of just walk around your room, can you try, did that do it? Yes. Having a move around your room. What's it like if you just move around your room? Maybe think, what would you do if you were asked to move around your room? And how is that different from walking? Other options with a little bit more information, a bit more quality. Can you have a wander around your room? What's that like? What does that feel like to have a wander? What about a saunter? How does that change your body movement? How does that change your how you perceive the movement? I can see some lovely sauntering. What about my personal favorite, strut? Go for a bit of a strut. How does that change? There's a bit more attitude, a bit more energy, a little bit more confidence maybe. Or what about a trudge? How does that change? Trudge, there's a bit more weight, a bit more down, maybe your posture changes as well. Fab. Excellent. So come back. Thank you everyone who tried it out. That was lovely watching you. How are we doing for time? Yeah, I think we'll, so I can get on to the other bits, I will keep going, but maybe you might want to have a think for yourself, maybe make a few notes as to what was those differences? How did that affect you? Thinking about kind of walk, that is something that we often use, an instruction we often use in a dance class, compared to move is quite bland but open, whereas the others had much more quality, much more dynamic to them. There is a second one that we won't actually do, but I'll talk you through, is very similar, but a different pace. If you were to run around your room, probably not, because you know, we're all in our lounges and bedrooms and things, and there's not a lot of space, but run. Or different options would be maybe shift, dart, dash, zoom, whoosh around. So those open language words, shift, open, but maybe a bit plain, but the others, dart, dash, zoom, have much more energy. And if you're teaching with a group and actually you're asking people to whoosh through the space, much less expectation on one foot in front of the other, but much more expectation on the energy. And actually there's one that I haven't put here, but I've stolen from Abby, is to surge. I love that one, to surge in the space. Another point is you don't have to use your entire body, because if you think, you can also, eyes can dart about the room or wander about the room. So actually it's also allows for different amounts of interpretation with your body. So I will do a brief roundup on that because I'm almost out of time. So open language, we think about language that includes and enables everyone to participate to their full potential rather than excludes. It's usually non-body part specific and may have a quality or texture associated with it. It's important because it enables everyone to follow the same set of instructions in their own way. You're not singling anyone out because they have a different way of moving. And it can be really useful for both technique and choreographic tasks. We don't have time to do this, I just have time to show you kind of a phrase that I did with it, an example of how it might work in more of a community setting. So you'll see we have different qualities there. So with the first line was we found stirs, big stir and a small stir, stretches and then melts, and then squeeze, float, heavy, and then that line repeated, squeeze, float, fizz. And so that's a way that you can use these different kind of textural quality open languages to create sequences. And very last slide. This is an example of a very similar thing, but in a much more structured way, much more kind of rigid. There's set counts there. There's a lot more words. It could be done quite quickly. So that's kind of two ends of an example how the same tool could be used for both a community setting and a professional setting. And that is me done. Hopefully that all made sense. I don't know whether we want to do questions now or maybe save them all up to the end, because I want to make sure everyone else has time for their talk and some of the things might overlap. So I know it's Laura D next. And I need to stop screen sharing. That would probably help.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura. That was great. I'm just going to swap the interpreters over and just find Laura D and spotlight Laura. Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful. Also, just at this point, just want to say a few of you had asked, just to let you know that this is being recorded so that we will put it on the website, and it will have a transcript with it as well. And also, Laura, if you're happy to share your PowerPoint slides, we can send those out to you as well. So yeah, don't worry, we'll be able to share all of the information that everybody's talking about today, and we'll put websites and stuff in the chat. You can share that, you can save the chat at the end, but also we'll save it as well, and if there's useful information, we'll send it out to you afterwards too. So handing over to the other Laura, who can introduce herself. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Laura Dahao. I've got light brown skin, my hair is long and black but tied up in a bun. I'm sat in my wheelchair in front of a canvas brown screen behind me to hide my terrible messy bedroom. So today I'm probably going to be talking more about sort of my work as a freelance dance artist and where sort of inclusive practice comes into creating work for me. I came from a sort of a hip hop background. So hip hop being things that I was interested in, things like locking, breakdance, whacking, which is kind of like really came from disco 80s and in the dance halls in New York. And definitely just working around that kind of era. And I came into dance through hip hop and then sort of translated into contemporary, and was often sort of the only wheelchair user in my hip hop classes, which is always very interesting. So I think I came from wanting to copy a teacher to coming to the other side and actually thinking, where is it coming from and what's the intention? And it fell on me, or in my head, it fell on me to ask the question. And I was always...
Laura, I'm really sorry to interrupt you. I can't hear you. Interpreter speaking here. I just need to explain that I can't really hear you.
Oh, okay. Is this slightly better?
Oh, that's much better. Thank you. Thank you.
No worries. Do you want me to start again, or how are you doing? Okay, so just talking about where I came from in terms of where I came from dance, I started in hip hop and different dance styles that I was interested in, I sort of latched onto. So things like whacking and locking, which were focused on sort of arm movement because I'm mostly wheelchair based. And wanting to sort of get into, so I started in companies and I was usually the only person in a wheelchair in hip hop classes. And it was my responsibility to sort of ask the questions because it felt like there wasn't a lot of consideration in terms of what I could do. And either I'd have to just copy a teacher or I'd have to find out for myself. And whilst that's a great thing to sort of want to research different dance styles and things like that, it would have been useful to be able to ask the question, or for teachers to know how to teach inclusively or to have that kind of knowledge. And it sort of spurred me on in terms of wanting to find out what it is that I find interesting about these styles, to want to put them into my work. So I think when wanting to create movement, I think Laura Jones has mentioned everything that I sort of wanted to pick up on as well, sort of. And when I'm in a room with a certain, with people that I'm working with, or when I'm in class, it is all about that open language. And that, I think depending on which environment you're in, there can be different terms that people use, whether it's translation, transposing, adaptation. And I think it's just about, for me, about where and what your body can do. And again, just being really clear about what it is that you're wanting to put across, that intention. Again, what LJ was saying. For me personally, wanting to create work is something that I do, and wanting to have themes, and it's mostly very autobiographical. So talking about sort of my own story and my own experiences and bringing that through dance. And it's only become very recently that I've been really aware of things that I'm wanting to get into, things like audio description. And if you're on social media and stuff, you'll see there's, in the captions, you'll see the image descriptions as well as captions on subtitles, so that things can be made more accessible for people, especially digitally. So in my line of work, I'm wanting to fuse all the things that I'm interested in. So whether it's sort of hip hop dance, as well as sort of the access, I was really interested and inspired by sign language and the way it looks and how it can be made clear, how I can bring across the words as well as the intention through fusing dance movement as well as the access. So that's my sort of line of where I am at the moment in terms of working. Being a wheelchair user in a hip hop scenario or in a hip hop class, it does single you out a little, but for me, it's always about asking the question. And I think it's really difficult to sort of pipe up. And if everybody's on the same wavelength, definitely for me, I felt that I couldn't do that in some places. But it does come with experience and just going to more classes and things like that, and asking about what it is that you want to happen. So I found in a lot of classes that there were those really bland movement words, like just walk in a space. See, how can you walk in a space? Can you run in a space? We're going to change that speed to 3, 4, 7, all this kind of stuff. But actually having those more descriptive words is really useful, and actually more, the intention is more clear. To be fair, I'm not sure how much else I have to say, to be fair, but I think I wanted to just express sort of my interest and what I do with my work is trying to really include all those different types of access tools, things like sign language, things like audio description. I wasn't very aware of how audio description can be involved in my work until I worked quite closely with the company, the Rationale Method, and it's sort of opened my eyes a lot and really broadened my horizons in terms of where I think my work can go. And I think it's really useful to be aware of those things and the more specific tools that people use in terms of access and wanting to see work. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say. So if there's any, if anybody had any questions about anything, do write them down or pop them in the chat. But yeah.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, if we can take a pause at this point, if anybody has questions for either of the Lauras, please do feel free to ask your question, or if you have any thoughts or comments, doesn't necessarily have to be a question. Okay, there'll be plenty more time at the end. Which was next, James? So now we're going over to James next.
Hello, I'm James. Just to describe myself, I'm a white male in my 20s. I'm wearing round glasses and I have longish hair tied back. I'm wearing a black t-shirt. I work with Laura as the project manager for Stopgap dance company. We are an inclusive dance company, which means we have disabled and non-disabled dancers working for us. I also work as a producer and I'm deaf. And so I'm happy to have captions and 2 sign language interpreters today to provide support. So thank you to Linda and Jacqueline. So just before lockdown, I was training with Definitely Theatre and Grey Eye Theatre. They're both deaf and disabled led companies. I will share links to their websites in the chat, and you can have a look at their work if you like. That's a copy and paste. So I was training with them in making shows more accessible and inclusive, which I'll be talking a little bit more about today. The first point I'd like to make is that access is not something that is just an afterthought and to be considered at the last minute. I'm really interested in how access can itself inform the creative process, and we can play with the rules rather than following them. So I'll start off with captioning. For those who may not know, captioning makes audio content accessible for deaf visitors and audiences. They can be normally provided in 2 ways. They can be pre-written and based in the script of the show, usually with a stage text box which positions normally millions of miles away from the main action on the stage, or they can be provided live by parent typists.
James, sorry, could I ask you to go back to captioning?
Sure.
Captioning. Also, if you could just
Sure, sorry. Yeah, so I'll start off with captioning. So caption can be provided in 2 ways. They can be pre-written and based on the script of the show, or they can be provided live by parent typists who translate the audio content live. So obviously, as a deaf person, I think captions are great, and they can benefit a wider group of audience members, as a lot of people enjoy being able to read the text as well as hearing it, because often audiences are older, they're losing their hearing and they need a bit of help. And subtitles also attract people whose first language is not English, for children learning to read and so on. So in terms of new audiences, subtitles are a good thing. There are many ways that text can be incorporated into the design of a set. For example, it can be projected onto a screen, it can be projected onto the set itself, it can be displayed on a TV monitor on stage, it can be downloaded as an app which people can use on their phones. So there are lots of different options. There are some interesting conversations by deaf artists at the moment around how subjective should caption be. For example, the sound caption could include feelings and emotions, like it could say anticipating or waiting in the sound captions. So I'll share a link to a video talking about this, which I really like, by the deaf artist Christine Song Kim. It offers an alternative for how to describe music, which I think somebody might find interesting. If you don't have the budget or funding for professional captioning, you can do it yourself. You could invest in a projector which you can link up to a laptop, and you could just copy and paste it into PowerPoint slides, which you can operate on the night, and they can be projected onto the back wall or screen. You could also provide a written transcript for your audience to read while watching the show. So there are low-cost options. I can also talk about audio description. So audio description is often offers us a description of the visual elements of a show, which the audience can listen to alongside the performance through a personal set of headphones. If you don't quite have the budget to professionally transcribe and record audio description, maybe you can record one yourself and make an MP3 file available online. I can talk about the ways you can do this. So in a live performance context, you have to think a lot about describing the action that's going on, but also the emotion and the atmosphere of what you're looking at. One way you could do this is to work together with other dancers and artists, making a draft description and going through it with them. You need to, in a way, come up with ways of vocalizing the intention of what you can see. So in a sense, it becomes a sort of dialogue between the dancer and the audio describer. It might be a good idea to think of audio description as part of the creative process of making your work. Really, it's about doing things in a different order and not making it any more difficult. You can work with professional audio describers in creative ways. You can work closely with them to fit their description to the artistic vision of the piece. For example, you can consider what tone of voice is the voiceover using. Are they being an objective describer, or could they become an additional character? Another option is to integrate the audio description into the performance, making it accessible to everyone. There could mean a soundtrack or live speaking during the show that describe the action taking place. In the same way, captioning audio description could be a useful way to keep some audiences more engaged when there isn't any spoken language in the show. So, meaning they can both listen and watch, and it makes for a more well-rounded, engaging experience. So yeah, I was really encouraged people to think about captioning and audio description as an embedded part of storytelling. I mean, this is like a whole strand of how you can tell your story, of how you give your audience the opportunity to engage with the characters. And I think at the moment we are at a time of really exciting opportunity in the arts in terms of how we can use access in creative ways. So yes, there's loads of brilliant guidance out there making stuff accessible. Although so far I've tended to concentrate on the captions and audio description, but I think there's also a lot we can do around the softer side of access, like putting on relaxed performances. So this is a performance that has a more relaxed attitude to noise and movement. Relaxed performances create a different atmosphere for the whole audience, giving everyone permission to respond naturally. So this may include some changes to the light and sound effects, adapting some of the show content. There are a lot of people who may benefit from relaxed performances, including those defining as neurodivergent and also parents with children. For example, some people don't like busy spaces and loud noises. It might be worth thinking whether you can offer a quiet space for people to go and relax. If you would like more information on the relaxed performances, I really recommend checking out the Artist Tourette's Hero. It's got loads of resources on the website. I'll link it in the chat. My last point is around cost and funding. Working as a producer, that's my job. So I know access is tricky for a lot of people because they do tend to leave it till last, and it often turns out there's not enough budget or time or knowledge to implement it properly. But the most obvious way of covering access costs is to include them in your project budget from the start, so that they are a central part of making and presenting the work. Yeah, so basically, where possible, include the cost of making your work more accessible. For example, captioning, you may want to include the budget in each funding application. So you need to budget for technology, caption designer, animator, if you're working with one, projector rental. I hope that I've shown today that even if you have no budget, it is possible to make your work accessible. Yeah, I'm finished. I hope you found that useful. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Any specific questions for James? then I'm going to hand it over to Natasha, who's here from Parable Dance. Thank you, James, and thanks, Natasha.
Just have I managed to unmute myself? Yeah. Hello. So my name's Natasha Britton. I'm a white woman with normally blonde hair pre-lockdown, but it's scraped back because my roots are so bad. Sitting in a room with a white wall behind me and a patterned sort of triangular pattern curtain to my side. I'm the co-founder and artistic director of Parable Dance, and I've been working in inclusive dance practice for just over 20 years. I started off teaching Can Do Co-Dance Company sessions, so for Can Do 2 youth group. I then taught at Magpie Dance for 16 years, and I've just spotted that Avril Hitman has come into the conversation. So Avril Hitman is the founding artistic director of Magpie Dance. So I think it'd be really wonderful to welcome you into questions at the end, Avril. As well as Magpie, I ran a company called 3D Dance very briefly, delivering inclusive dance practice in the Southeast. Then I worked for another company called Rounded Rhythm and delivered a lot of different dance projects that were as a freelance artist for lots of different organisations. We decided to set up Parable in 2019 with the aim of starting inclusive dance classes down in Brighton and offering workshops around the Southeast. We also have a really strong focus and emphasis on delivering different types of training, whether that's for mentoring for dance teachers or delivering sessions for teachers in primary schools, for example. So lots of different kind of training offers that we have. Because training is such an important aspect of our work, we, during the lockdown, decided to kind of think outside the box a little bit and think about the fact that there are so many, there were so many dance artists at home and not delivering face-to-face content, and that there were so many new graduates and new students who didn't have that opportunity to go and have those face-to-face moments and interactions. So we decided to make a film which brings together lots of different artists' voices and ideas about inclusive dance practice. In the film, it features 42 different dance artists and 8 dancers, and Laura are both in the film. They're from all over the UK, lots of different companies represented. Sadly, not every company in the country. That would be amazing, but the inclusive dance scene has massively expanded, thankfully, in recent years. So what we would encourage from the film is that you watch it, but then you also reach out to all the many organisations, and there's loads more that are appearing in the chat, reach out to them and connect with them in your communities. So the film, which I will send, oh, you've done the links to the film, perfect, thank you. I was going to say I'll send a link. It's on YouTube, it's about an hour long, and it has 5 different sections, which gives advice about people starting out, advice about not excluding people, top tips for when you're teaching in the classroom and things like that. So it's really worth a watch. And one of the main reasons that we wanted to make it is to really start a conversation. We absolutely didn't intend for it to be, this is it, this is inclusive dance, off you go. It's very much, here's loads of different ideas. Some of them really contradict each other, which I think is great. So I think Laura Jones made a comment about how sometimes you can do something in a class to include somebody, but doing that thing excludes another person. And in the same way, some of the advice in the film contradicts what somebody else might have said about inclusive practice. There's no right or wrong way. It's all about taking on board lots of different ideas and thinking about what works for you. So I really suggest you watch that. Our next steps for Parable will involve supporting emerging dance artists through a number of different opportunities. So I would really suggest that you stay in touch with Southeast Dance and with Parable Dance to kind of watch this space and see about those opportunities. My main advice whenever I talk to anybody who's starting in inclusive dance is to just get in touch with as many people as possible. So follow people on social media, email people, introduce yourself, volunteer for things, attend workshops, network, and kind of try and carve out your own path. It's sad that we have to do that, and that seems to be, you know, Laura D was saying that you have to take yourself into situations and sometimes push people to think a bit differently. And I think that's the case no matter where you sit in inclusive dance. I think you need to come at it with, you know, a bit of gumption, a bit of energy. Sorry, that's not a great word to translate. And really think about where you might fit, and maybe even be a bit pushy. Really try and meet people, really try and network so that you create some opportunities for yourself. Thinking about what interests you most, I think, as well, is really important. So inclusive dance is a really broad term. The amount of times that people ask me, what is inclusive dance? So thinking about inclusive practice as a term is including everyone, so not excluding. But within that, there's also lots of different dance companies and organisations out there who have a specific focus within inclusive dance. So for example, there's companies working specifically with people with learning disabilities. There's companies working specifically with people with visual or hearing impairments, or who are wheelchair users. And so it's worth thinking about what kind of area of practice interests you, fits with you and suits you, so that you can kind of find your place in inclusive practice. For those of you who don't know about it, I would highly recommend joining the 11 Million Reasons to Dance network. Their next meeting is on the 13th of April. That's run by People Dancing, and it's a network, a chance to get together and hear about what's going on in inclusive dance, and look at challenges that are being faced, things that you can kind of, opportunities that you can get involved with. So I would really recommend getting in touch with them. We'll share the link in the chat as well for that. Just to kind of round up my sort of bit of the conversation, I would really suggest that you look into the challenges that are being faced by dancers with disabilities. So I don't have a lived experience of disability myself. I think it's really important that as somebody who works in inclusive arts, I have an understanding and constantly try and be involved in conversations that enable me to have a broader understanding. So if you haven't come across it before, I would really suggest that you look into the We Shall Not Be Removed movement. It was set up as a result of the pandemic to ensure the sustainability of inclusive arts, both now and beyond the pandemic. And they look at the barriers and try and understand the constant challenges that dancers with disabilities and inclusive organisations are having to overcome. So that's a really, really important one, I think, to try and look into if you can, stand you in good stead. There's been lots of talk about different methods, different companies. There's been talk of the types of things that you might do, the types of approaches in class. One of the other things I just wanted to touch on was resources. So I've got a list of a few resources that I'll share in the chat in a second. It includes links for the Stopgap films that Laura mentioned earlier, to pop in there. There's also a really nice resource on YouTube that's a Magpie Dance resource, which is a Makaton signing resource. There's 50 different signs that the dancers teach you to support you using Makaton signing in your sessions. If you don't know what Makaton signing is, it's a type of sign language that supports speech when you're working with people with learning disabilities. So I'll share that for you in the chat. Yeah, and welcome any questions. I'll hand back to Lou.
Thank you, Natasha. And I know that, Natasha, you're also setting up your own networking sessions, aren't you? What's the best way for people if they want to join those? Is it to email you directly?
Yes, yeah, if you send me an email, then I can see which of the networks is the most suitable for you to join. We've got a couple of networks that we're opening up, so you absolutely do get in touch. We'd love to welcome you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? Sorry, I'm just going to change the spotlight on the interpreters. Thank you. Well, I have a question to kick off, please, which is a question for all of you, whoever would like to answer first. I'd like to know what as organisations we can do to help and support, particularly in terms of thinking about the next generation of disabled artists coming through to be professional dancers. What, if there was, I mean, I guess money aside, what should we be thinking about? What's needed?
Shall I go? In my opinion, what's needed is open dialogue is the most important thing. I think there's so many of us in different organisations all around the country fighting the same fight and shouting about the same things. And I think the more that we connect as a dance community, the more we'll achieve together as a united voice. So reach out to people. It's a really lonely profession, working as a dance freelancer, and it doesn't have to be. I think we all end up having those moments where we feel a bit on our own, perhaps nervous to reach out, perhaps kind of feeling like we'd be bothering someone. And I really don't think we would. I think, you know, if somebody doesn't have time, they don't have time. But I think reach out to people more, stay connected. This year has taught us anything, it's that we really should stay connected.
Yeah, I think so. Laura J talking. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The kind of the staying connected, and I think sharing. Yeah, just kind of trying to share knowledge and information. I think it is, as Natasha was saying, it's very easy to kind of feel isolated, and I think sometimes there has been a feeling of, well, we've worked on this, so this is our thing. But I think we're definitely trying to think, particularly again with this year, kind of be really open. And I think it's important for organizations to be open and kind of share what they are doing, what they're working on. I think being aware that there's, as James was sort of saying, there's different sides of access as well. There's kind of things that you can put kind of physically in place, or things that you can, adjustments that you can make. But then also being aware that there's no point in putting all these things in place if you don't tell people about it, and tell people in a way that is accessible for them. So making sure that if you have things like, maybe it's captioned performances, making sure that that information, that it will be captioned, is in a clear and accessible format. And don't be afraid to shout about it. So many organizations have, like, say, for example, on their website, all the stuff that they do, and then you've got to search right down the bottom to find any information on access. Why not put it at the top? Why not, shout about what you're doing, how you're making things accessible? Because so often the things that make it accessible can support, so many other people. It's not just, doesn't just benefit people with disabilities. They're my thoughts.
Thank you. James or Laura D, do you have anything you'd like to add? Don't have to.
just to also echo the idea of collaboration, I think it's so important for artists to collaborate. And I think it was an amazing thing that Parable Dance made that video so that you can see a range of things that are possible and how people work. And I think especially now in lockdown, it's so important to sort of highlight what people can and can't do. And it's just about linking those people and wanting to reach out to things that you are interested in and trying new things. I think over lockdown, I was fortunate enough to be able to create a film that explored the different types of access, using sort of like trying to edit myself all the subtitles and working with the rationale method on audio description and how it can be made interesting and things like this, and how it can look, and visually working remotely with different types of people. And it's just really important to continue that conversation, collaboration, and sort of sharing of skills and knowledge. So yeah, just asking the questions really, and I think just being brave and wanting to just ask questions.
Just to add to that, I think organisation can learn a lot from our current situation, because I know that a lot of artists have said that the roads have become a bit more accessible in lockdown. People can go to meetings that they wouldn't normally be able to go to. They don't have to physically travel to get to places. Everything's a bit more accessible online. Even the ability to do work from bed, that does work a lot better for a lot of people. And I think we've all shown that we can be more accessible in the way that we can work. So yeah, I think that's something that organisation could learn.
Thank you. Also, I can see that some people are sharing information from organisations that they might be with in the chat. Please also do that. This is a chance for you also to network, as we can't network face to face at the moment. We're doing these sessions so that you can also get to know other people. So if you want to share your website or your email in the chat, then please do, and we can share. If you're happy to share things with everyone, we can share those out. Thank you. Does anybody else have a question?
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I was just thinking, this is to anyone, what's kind of your opinion on for example, in dance classes, making them all as accessible as possible, but then also having sort of more like targeted groups. So a dance class for wheelchair users, or, just because I'm just thinking that sometimes you try to make work really inclusive, but some people's needs are kind of clash. So some people need to have music really loud whilst others can't have that. So I was just wondering whether you think there's space for both sort of more open access sessions, but also more specifically inclusive groups as well.
Who would like to answer that question? Laura.
I'll start. I'll kick off the answers. Yeah, I think both have merits, both have pros and cons. I guess one of the things is that sometimes I sit with when you're putting in accessibility features, that kind of it's almost to say what it is and just be really open with what it is that you are doing to create access and enable access. And then that can inform people, and people will be able to choose to a certain extent whether then they think it's suitable, rather than saying this class is suitable for, or this class is suitable for people in wheelchairs. It could be this class uses tools of whatever they are, which may be useful for people, you know, who have different physicalities when dancing. So I think it's particularly because I've been stung before by people say, oh yeah, it's accessible, but their idea of accessible is different to my idea of accessible. So I think being open with what you're doing to enable access, I think having those kind of specific groups, there's definite benefits to it. I think I would have loved to have gone to a class where it was just, I will say wheelchair users, because that's what I am, you know, just wheelchair dancers. And I have had experience where we did set up a specific kind of a few days specifically for wheelchair dancers. And that was quite liberating to be like, yeah, for people, although we're not the same, to have, you know, more similarities, but you don't want to then kind of go down the route of segregating off and, well, you can't, you know, this is for you. And so, you know, the mainstream's not for you and we're just going to put you in the side. I think that it is valuable to have that, as you said, that open access and make sure that there is kind of integration and opportunities for different bodies, different people, different learning styles to mix and share and learn from each other. So I don't think I came down either side on the argument. I think both have potential merits. Yeah.
I totally agree. Both have merits. I've been in so many conversations over the years where people have talked about not just classes, but things like performance events. So, you know, do you have a youth dance platform that's specifically for people with disabilities and inclusive groups, and then have a youth dance platform that's mainstream schools? There's pros and cons, like Laura said, for both situations. And I think ultimately it's about being open-minded and making sure that everyone's needs are met along the way at some point, but also that there's enough crossovers that we're not creating this segregated society. There's certain classes where it might be more beneficial to have a specific group in mind, and that might depend on perhaps the particular skills of the teacher. It might depend on the amount of support that they've got. So if it's just that teacher and they've got no one else helping them and there's no funding to have anyone else helping them, it might be that they need to just focus on that area of specialism. For example, you know, a wheelchair-based dance class with a maximum of 10 participants, as opposed to saying, yes, I'll welcome people with learning disabilities, and, you know, and adding many different people to your list, could leave that person falling short because they're not able to charge out of the room to go after somebody who likes to run. They might not be able to meet the needs of somebody who's partially sighted if they're also meeting the needs for the people who are wheelchair users without any support. So it's about kind of thinking around what you can have in place, why you've got it in place, and how you, like Laura said, how you describe it, how you just being honest about what it is you're offering, but really trying to have as many opportunities as possible where dance is just dance, and everybody is a dancer.
Thank you. James and Laura D, did you want to say anything, or Laura?
I guess, again, it's just about echoing what sort of Natasha and Laura had said. I think if you wanting to sort of section off people because of certain things, you know, you're making it clear that that's specifically for them, and actually you're not making it inclusive. So I think it's just about your advertising, I guess, or how you describe what you're doing and being clear about what you're doing, rather than saying this is, well, you can be specific about this and that. And actually it's just about being clear about what it is that you're doing. So that's really all I have to say.
Sorry, I don't really have anything to add. I totally agree with what everyone was saying. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have a question?
Hi, it's not so much it's not so much a question, but more just a comment to say I just found what Laura D was saying about her experience in the dance class really helpful, because sometimes I feel as a teacher working with a wheelchair dancer over the last couple of years that sometimes I put a lot, it's hard to know where the translation lies. Should I take that responsibility or to translate even, and I sometimes feel that's a bit unfair on the dancer, because they know their body better than I do, and I worry that, you know, I'm giving a really terrible version and then likewise in the opposite direction, that I'm not giving enough if I put the onus on the dancers. So just that was from both Laura's, actually, it was really helpful just to hear your experiences so that I can be have a better understanding of what I should do and have those conversations more openly, rather than just try to guess and be, I think both myself and that dancer are being very polite with each other and trying to sort it out in that way, but perhaps we just should have more of a conversation. So I really appreciate your comments to help me to do that.
Thanks, Carrie. Does anyone want to comment on that? Yes, Laura.
Hey, Carrie. Yeah, I think, yeah. Oops, sorry, just trying to make my microphone clear. Yeah, it's about, for me, it's about that dialogue, that open dialogue, and not being scared of what to not offend. And I think I've gone through my whole dance career being like, I'm not sure if I want to ask because I don't want to offend you. I don't want you to offend me. And then likewise with the other person that I'm collaborating with, they're like, oh, I don't want to offend you. Am I saying something wrong? But actually it's about that open dialogue to say what it is that you want to get across and being really clear about it. And again, maybe it's just about the intention of what you want. And if you're finding it hard to translate yourself, then it's just about asking the questions like, what is it that you're trying to say? And what is it that you want from the movement in its most basic form and its most basic foundation, rather than it has to look a certain way, the aesthetic isn't this, but actually it comes from a place of blah, blah, blah.
And can I add as well? I think, yeah, definitely the idea of having the conversation, because I think, as you said, like as a teacher or as a leader, you come with your knowledge of dance, but so often the dancers come with their knowledge of their body, and so it's kind of finding that that conversation and that place to meet and being open about what works and what doesn't work. I know I've had both experiences of when someone has given me a translation and I've gone, yeah, that really, really does nothing for me. And then I kind of feel like, should I kind of half do it because, you know, they're watching and that's what they've told me, but actually I don't really feel it does anything. But then equally the flip side of the oh, you can just work it out, do your own thing, and give me something. Yeah, so I think, yeah, that kind of getting over the politeness and actually just getting down to, okay, what is working, have that conversation, make space for that conversation. And some, you know, it's not always something that you can have in the middle of a dance class when there's lots of other people around and you're kind of, your attention is split. Sometimes it does have to be, you know, finding another time and space to have those conversations and, yeah, just be really open about what does work, and remembering as well that not everything that works one day will work the following week. you know, and things, dancers develop and change, you know, so yeah, just being open to it.
Also, just in terms of translations, so Carrie, was it, who said about working with your student for a couple of years now, so you would have kind of gauged each other and how long it takes to create a translation, but it's really worth considering if you are making translations for dancers, if you're expecting dancers to make their own translations, that's a whole nother step in the process. So obviously, if I'm teaching a standing phrase and I'm teaching somebody who is on crutches, for example, I'm teaching my version, and as well as learning my version through their body, they're choreographing and making a version on their body and having to remember it whilst looking at me. So there's this whole other layer of process that takes time. So just making sure that you allow that extra time in your sessions, if you are building in that expectation to create your own translation.
Thanks everyone. James, did you want to add anything? Like, great, thank you. Any further questions or comments or anything that anybody would like to share? I will ask this question that I think a lot of young emerging artists that come to talk to us, there is a willingness to make their work accessible, but often a nervousness, and obviously everything that's been shared today hopefully helps to take that nervousness away. But just wondering if people wanted to do more training, more thinking. Obviously today is a very short session and you've all shared lots of things that we've popped in the chat, but if there's specific courses that you know about or anything like that that people can go on, because particularly I think within vocational training and university settings where a lot of people who are here today might be from, access isn't something that's covered, or how to teach accessibly, or how to make your work or the teaching that you have accessible. So if there's places that we can signpost people to, that would be really helpful. Who would like to jump in?
Yeah, I can jump in. Yeah, I can signpost to a great resource by Unlimited, which is a disability-led organisation, and they have a resource pack on how to provide access across the performing arts. I can just link it in the chat. I think it's really in depth.
Can you give me that name again?
They're called Unlimited. Yeah, I can just copy and paste it into the chat. It's really in depth and detailed. Yeah, you can have a look. But yeah, I think that's a really good starting point for thinking about access in a broader sense. And yeah, I covered all the different access provisions. So I hope that's a useful resource.
I have to do a shameless plug for Stopgap. So we're currently, one of the sessions is happening right now. Stopgap are running a course called Seedbed, and it's a 12-week.
Sorry, could you do that name again?
Yeah, Seedbed.
Seed as in?
Seed as in, yeah, to grow plants. Yes. And it's a teacher training course, 12 weeks at the moment because of the current situation. It's online in evening class once a week. And we have both teachers from Stopgap and also guest lecturers who have different lived experiences of different disabilities, and sharing kind of knowledge around working with different specific groups, and kind of, you know, various know-how, top tips and things. So we're currently running that now, but we will, because we've had a lot of interest in it, our plan is to run it again probably from September. Don't know yet whether that will be online or not, but I will.
You're on mute, Laura.
I muted myself instead of putting it in the chat. Yes, so that's yeah, so that we'll be running that again, hopefully in September. Don't know if it's online or not. And one of the things is that when you've done that, then it can lead on to teaching our IRIS syllabus that Stopgap has created, an inclusive dance syllabus aimed for young or emerging training dancers with disabilities. There's also, while I think about it, and I will find the link, is Shape Arts are a brilliant, there's lots and lots of information. I don't know if anyone's already shared it, but Shape Arts are great for resources. So I shall find that link and share that too.
So obviously we have mentioned the film, and that's been in the chat earlier. So I'd recommend that's a really good place to start, to see lots of different artists and different ways of working, to be able to reach out into your local community and see what's there for you. Another organisation I would suggest looking up is Dance Syndrome. They're based up in Lancashire, and they have loads and loads of different online classes. And one thing that's really interesting is that they co-lead, so they have an artist with a disability and an artist without a disability leading every session. And every class is completely open access, so for people with and without disabilities. They've got rave classes, ballet classes, wake up and dance classes. There's classes every single day, so it's worth giving them a go. It's a chance to kind of immerse yourself in someone else's practice and see how somebody else does it.
Thank you. Laura D, did you want to add anything?
I think my only I would have posted Stopgap, to be fair, and people dancing, and I think it's just about trying to find out how other people work, and just keeping a lookout for inclusive practice in different settings. Can't think of any off the top of my head, but for sure it's definitely worth looking around and seeing how different people do it, and catering for yourself as well, to be able to cater how you would then put it into place.
Great, thank you. And again, we will send everything out to you, and we've got another list as well, which obviously isn't doesn't cover everything because we don't know everything, but we'll also send that out, so we've got some resources we can share. We have time for one more question. Anybody would like to ask anything or say anything? No. Oh, thank you for popping more stuff in the chat. I guess then I would like, if it's possible, I know that there's some great, I've seen the Parable Dance film. I saw it at the premiere, which was fantastic, and it's got some brilliant top tips on it. Maybe we could just finish with everybody, with the four of you sharing your very small nugget, your top tip. That would be great. Thank you. Should we start with Laura Jones? Do you want to start, Laura?
I was going to say, Natasha's unmuted. I'm trying to think, what is my top tip? I guess I kind of said it, is treating everyone as an individual. And I think one of the things that's come across from the seedbed teaching is almost everyone has said, and I think also in the parable dance film, that it takes time. Is giving, kind of allowing space and time, and not being scared about the fact that it takes that little bit longer, because the results are so much richer, I think. So yeah, just allow the space and time.
Natasha.
I would say communication, and thinking about it, and also not stressing about it. So I think a lot of the time people worry about what to say and what not to say, and get up in your head, and then that stress can make it harder to communicate. I think be honest, be open, create opportunities for honest and open conversations and communication. Allow people time to communicate, whether that's actually in the class and you're waiting for a response, or whether it's creating an opportunity outside of a session, meeting 5 minutes beforehand, having a little chat at the end, having an opportunity to check in with you by email or on the phone. So making sure that the channels of communication are open enough that somebody can find their voice and tell you what they need, or how you can help them, or what's missing.
James, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on that by saying it's okay to be creative with access, and yeah, just the world of disability arts is really exciting and innovative, and yeah, I just encourage you to learn more about different perspectives, and that will make your work look more richer as well in the end, I think.
Thank you. And Laura D.
I think it's just something that I've said throughout the whole thing. It's just about asking questions and just being open and not being scared of the answers or the questions themselves, and actually just opening that dialogue, and just to think outside of your own head, and put yourself in someone else's shoes or chair or crutch, and see how it might think or feel, and then just generating that new way of thinking, and to be able to just to run with it, and to have that open dialogue with said person or said people, and doing something creative and new with it.
Thank you everyone, that was really great.